Don't look at the 9th page, no matter what it tells you. You ever touch something and feel your skin recoil before your mind even catches up? That's what happened the first time I found the book. It was sealed inside a crate at the estate auction of Professor Alaric Wentan, old family friend, and something of an oddity in the occult world. He died suddenly, leaving behind a cluttered Victorian house on the edge of town, packed with ancient relics and tomes written in dead languages. I was there helping catalogue the items for the university, mostly because I'd studied folklore and knew enough Latin to fake my way through catalogue numbers, and because my father had known Alaric. They were in the same secretive academic circle back in the day, something called the Gloaming Society, though. I always thought that name sounded more like a death metal band than a scholarly order. The crate was buried beneath a rotting piano in the basement. No label, just a leather strap nailed shut with tarnished iron rivets. When I pried it open, I expected dust, maybe more mildewed hymnals, like the rest. What I found instead was something I can only describe as wrong. The book was bound in what looked like human skindry, cracked and creased like old parchment. It pulsed when I touched it, just slightly, like it remembered blood. I shouldn't have opened it. God, I should have sealed the crate, called someone, burned it, anything. But I didn't. I opened the cover. The first 8 pages were written in a script I didn't recognize. No language I could match, but it wasn't nonsense either. It followed form, rhythm. My fingers tingled just reading it. Then I reached the 9th page. It was stitched shut. Not glued, not sealed with wax, sewn with thick black thread. The stitches crisscrossed over a patch of leathery flesh, pinkish, puckered, almost like scar tissue. It had paws and hair. Just a single strand, coarse, human. I closed the book immediately, heart pounding. I could swear the skin had twitched under my fingers. "Find something good?" asked Danny, stepping into the room. Danica Sharpamy, friend from the department, archivist, skeptic, and stubborn as a mule. She wore fingerless gloves and a look that said she'd rather be digging up bones than books. "Depends on your definition of good," I said, nudging the book toward her. She picked it up with a frown. "What is this, horror prop inventory?" "Feel it." She turned it over in her hands and paused. "This is real skin. I think it's human." Danny looked at me. "Well, that's illegal." "Yeah." She opened the cover, flipped to the first few pages, then made a face. Language looks like Aramaic had a baby with Greek and threw it into a blender. "What's this?" She tapped the sewn page. "I don't know. It's sealed. Flesh over a page." "And naturally, your first instinct was to open it." "I didn't," I said quickly. "Not that page." She smirked. "Yet." We decided to bring the book back to my apartment instead of the university. Part of me didn't want it logged or analysed. Not yet. Something about it felt personal. Or maybe it made itself feel personal. That's harder to explain. That night, Danny stayed over. We took turns examining the pages, photographing the symbols, trying to translate what little we could. We found references to something called mortuora, a name repeated across all 8 visible pages. From what we could decipher, it wasn't a god or demon in the traditional sense. It was something else, something that lived in silence and fed on memory. We didn't talk about opening the 9th page again until around 2 a.m. "Maybe there's something hidden under it," Danny said. "A summoning? A ritual? Or a curse?" I offered. She raised her eyebrows. "Don't you want to know what's so dangerous it had to be sewn shut with flesh?" "No, I lead." The next morning, Danny was gone. At first, I figured she'd just gone out for coffee, but her phone was still charging on the kitchen counter, and her coat was hanging on the chair. Her boots were near the door, still wet from yesterday's rain. I called her name, checked the hall, nothing. No text, no note. I waited 2 hours before I called her cell. It went straight to voicemail. Then I called her roommate, Mel. "Danny who?" she asked. "Danica Sharp. She lives with you." There was a pause. "I think you've got the wrong number, sorry." "No, wait, Mel. It's me, Jason. You and I met at that film screening Danny's thesis thing?" "Sorry, I don't know a Danny, and I don't know you." I sat in silence after the call ended. My chest felt hollow. I checked my phone for photos of her. I'd taken one just last week, flipping me off at the archives for sneaking a spider onto her desk. It wasn't there. None of them were. I checked texts. Nothing from her. The message thread we'd had for months was gone. I called our department head, Dr. Lestrange. "Jason," she said, "you doing all right? You sound off." "I'm fine. Do you remember Danny Danica Sharp? She's in my program." Another pause. "There's no Danica in our department. She worked in archives. We don't have a female grad in archives right now." I hung up before she could ask more. I was shaking. I went back to the book, sat cross-legged on the floor in front of it. I ran my hand across the cover. It was warm. "Where is she?" I asked. Of course, it didn't answer. I flipped through the pages again. 1 through 8, all there, unchanged. Then I reached the 9th. It had been cut open. Not entirely, just a slice down the center, like a Y incision. Enough to peel back the flesh, enough to read what was written underneath. I didn't want to look, but I did. And as my eyes moved across the strange, looping script, something tugged at the back of my brain, like a fishing hook lodged in memory. Images flashed behind my eyelids. Dani's laugh, her voice, her crooked smile, and then, gone. I jolted backward, gasping. Something had pulled. I checked my phone again. No pictures, no texts. And this time, I couldn't even remember what she looked like. I remembered her being, but not her. Only the feeling of her absence, like teeth pulled from a smile. I screamed, punched the floor, pushed the book away. It pulsed. Once. I didn't sleep that night. I kept repeating her name under my breath like a prayer, even as the details vanished. Danica. Danica. But by morning, I wasn't sure if I was saying it right anymore. I was losing her. The book hadn't just made her disappear, it had erased her. Not from the world, from memory. And that terrified me more than anything, because I realized I couldn't even trust my own grief. And I hadn't been the one to open the 9th page. Not fully. Which meant someone, or something, had. And I had no idea how far this thing reached. I didn't go back to the university for 3 days. I stayed in my apartment with the curtains drawn and every light on. The book sat on the floor like a sleeping animal, waiting. I thought about burning it, tearing it apart, throwing it in the river. But every time I got close, the same thought whispered through my head. What if it's the only way to get her back? The memories of Dani faded so fast it made me nauseous. By the 2nd day, I couldn't remember what her voice sounded like. By the 3rd, I wasn't even sure if I'd made her up. My phone contacts were blank. Photos gone. Social media wiped clean of her existence. But the hole remained. A shape of someone who mattered. I tried to research the book Mortuoro, but nothing came up. No references, no ancient texts, nothing in the dusty corners of the internet. I posted a snippet of the symbols from the first page on an occult forum I sometimes used for research tips. Hours later, the post was removed. My account was locked. I tried to make a new one. That was shut down too. It was like the book felt me trying to talk about it and struck me down. Finally, on the 4th night, I decided to leave. I stuffed the book into my backpack and headed for Alaric Went's old house. Maybe there was something, their notes, diaries, anything to explain what I was dealing with. The place was abandoned, padlocked by the university. I broke in through the basement window I'd used before. It smelled worse now, stale and thick with mildew. My flashlight beam caught a scuttling chaperet's vanishing into the dark. I went straight to Alaric's old study on the 2nd floor. The door was locked, but I kicked it in, splintering the frame. The room was as I remembered. Books stacked on every surface, candle stubs melted into plates, old papers yellowed with age. And at the center, Alaric's massive oak desk, scarred with knife marks. I dug through every drawer. Most were filled with old research notes in his crabbed handwriting, mostly nonsense about ley lines and planetary alignments. I found one thin journal buried under a stack of maps, bound in soft leather. I flipped through it desperately. Most of the entries were rambling. Then I found one with the word mortuoro scrawled across the top. I read it by flashlight, my hands shaking. I am certain now that mortuoro is not a spirit in the traditional sense. It is more like a fissure in reality, a worm burrowed through the living world, feeding on presence. When one looks upon the 9th page, it gazes back, and the tether of memory unspools. One becomes a ghost while still alive, forgotten by all, until even the self dissolves. This is the nature of the 9th page. It does not kill, it erases. Even the erasure itself fades like breath on glass. I have hidden the key to the 9th page with flesh, so it cannot be easily read. But something in me aches to finish the work, to open it fully, to know what lies beyond forgetting. Perhaps it promises immortality. Perhaps oblivion. I do not trust myself to resist. If I do not survive, know this. Do not look at the 9th page. That last line was underlined twice. I slammed the journal shut. Too late. I heard a noise downstairs, a floorboard creaking. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. Then a voice. Hello? Jason? It was my father. I hadn't heard from him in months, not since he'd started pulling away after Mom died. He sounded weak, older than I remembered. Dad? I called, moving to the doorway. Come downstairs, son. We need to talk. I crept down the hall, past the water-stained wallpaper, my flashlight jittering with every step. When I reached the landing, I saw him in the front foyer, standing in the pale wash of moonlight through the cracked stained glass. He looked the same, rumpled grey suit, thinning hair, except something in his eyes didn't fit. They were too dark, as if someone had blackened the pupils with ink. Dad? I whispered again. Bring me the book, Jason, he said. It's important. You know I've always tried to protect you. Bring it here. I tightened my grip on the backpack. How do you know about the book? His smile flickered. I told you, remember? I told you what Went was hiding. I shook my head. No, you didn't. Yes, he insisted, stepping forward. I've always known. Bring it here, son. I backed up. You're not him. Something about his mouth split, stretching too wide. A line of teeth unfolded beneath the skin of his cheek, like something was smiling through him. Jason, he rasped, voice doubling over itself like two tapes playing out of sync. Bring it here. I ran. I tore down the hall, through the kitchen, back into the basement. I slammed the door shut behind me, heart pounding, and fumbled for the basement window. I threw myself through it, into the cold night air, cutting my palms on broken glass. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. When I looked back, the house was dark again. No sign of him. I drove home shaking, the book on the passenger seat. Part of me wanted to throw it out the window at 70 miles per hour, but I couldn't let it go. When I got back to my apartment, the front door was ajar. I froze. Inside, the lights were off. My couch had been pushed aside, the rug curled back on itself like something had scuttled across it, and on the wall, written in something thick and dark, were the words, "Open the 9th page." I slammed the door shut, locked it, and slid the chain across. My breath fogged in the cold air. The room smelled like iron and mildew. I set the book on the table and stared at it. I couldn't trust the house. I couldn't trust the people I saw, even those I loved. This thing was in my head now, playing tricks on me, whispering. I couldn't sleep. All night, I watched the book. At dawn, I finally dozed off. When I woke, the book was gone. So was the table. In fact, the entire living room was empty. No couch, no lamp, no photos on the walls. I stumbled through the apartment in a panic. My bedroom was stripped bare. My clothes were gone. My toothbrush, my towels, my shoes. Everything I owned had vanished. I grabbed my phone, also gone. I ran into the hall. No neighbors, no lights on in the other apartments. The hallway stretched on forever, flickering with dim emergency lights. I opened the door to the stairwell and found only darkness. I realized, with a sickening twist in my gut, that I was gone too. Or at least, the world had stopped remembering me. And somewhere out there, Someone had opened the 9th page fully. I stumbled through the building like a ghost. The halls stretched on impossibly far, the walls peeling, buzzing with a low electric hum that made my teeth ache. I banged on doors, shouting for help, but no one answered. No sound came back at all, like the place had swallowed echoes too. Finally, I found a door at the far end that was open just a crack. Beyond it lay cold morning light spilling over cracked linoleum. It was the stairwell again, what passed for it now. I ran. I took the stairs 3 at a time, breath ragged, my heart thudding so hard it felt like something was trying to crawl out of my chest. The stairwell looped on itself, twisting like a spiral shell, landing after landing, leading nowhere. I kept going until my legs buckled, until I fell, scraping my knees on concrete. When I looked up, there was a door, wooden, splintered around the knob. I threw my shoulder into it and fell out into a grey field of dead grass. I blinked at the sky, pale and empty. Behind me, the apartment building was gone. Just a hollow wind blowing through the brittle weeds. I staggered to my feet, my knees bleeding, and turned in circles. The field stretched on forever. But there was something in the distance. A lone house, squatting under the grey sky like a cancerous growth. I recognized it instantly. Alaric Went's house. I didn't want to go back. Every cell in my body screamed to run the other way, but the emptiness around me offered nothing else. And the book was there. I felt it, like a toothache buried in bone. I walked. By the time I reached the porch, my feet were raw and blistered. The front door was hanging open, the same voice calling from the dark inside. "Jason," it rasped, echoing off the walls. "Jason, please." It was Danny's voice. My hands trembled. I knew she was gone, erased. This was the book's game, but that didn't stop the need in my chest, the desperate pull to remember her, to anchor myself in anything human again. I stepped inside. The house was cold, darker than night. I fumbled for the flashlight in my pocket and clicked it on. The beam cut across the foyer, illuminating water-stained wallpaper and a trail of wet footprints leading into the hall. They looked fresh, glistening as if someone had just stepped out of a lake. "Jason," the voice called again. "Closer now." I followed the footprints down the hall, past shattered picture frames and peeling paper. At the end was Alaric's study, the door ajar. I pushed it open and nearly dropped the light. The room was filled with people, dozens of them, standing shoulder to shoulder, unmoving, their skin grey and sagging, eyes milky and blind. They all turned toward me at once, heads creaking on stiff necks. "Jason," they whispered together. I stepped back. My heel caught the threshold, and I almost fell. "Don't leave us," they breathed. "You can remember us. You must remember us." I forced myself to look at their faces, and I realized with a shudder that I recognized none of them. But something in me did. A cold itch at the back of my mind told me I should know them, that I had known them, once. "Who are you?" I croaked. They reached out as one, hands blackened, fingernails cracked. Their voices rasped in unison. "The book remembers. The book keeps us alive." I staggered into the room. There, on the desk, was the book. Its cover pulsed under the light, seams of flesh tightening and relaxing like a breathing wound. The 9th page lay fully opened now, the flesh peeled back and pinned at the corners with black iron nails. Symbols writhed across it, black ink crawling like ants. The dead chorus whispered, "Read." I slammed the book shut. Their voices cut off like someone had thrown a switch. I looked up. The room was empty again. No bodies, no whispering crowd. Just the house settling around me, floorboards creaking. I backed out into the hall, clutching the book to my chest. I needed answers. I needed someone to tell me how to stop this. I thought of Alaric's journal, the fragments I'd read about the Gloaming Society. Maybe, just maybe, someone from that circle still lived, someone who knew the book's history. I ran back to my Cara, what looked like my car. The paint was the wrong color, and the plates were missing, but the keys in my pocket fit the ignition. I drove. The roads were empty, twisted into weird angles like a maze. But finally, I found myself on the old highway that led to the university district. I pulled into the parking lot behind the library and ran up the staff entrance, praying the doors wouldn't vanish under my fingers. They didn't. The library was dark inside, the security lights casting dim pools across the marble floor. I ran to the archives and keyed in my access code. It worked. Inside, I rummaged through the card files until I found what I needed: records of the Gloaming Society. I remembered old gossip that one surviving member still corresponded with Alaric until his deather, Professor Elliot Graves, retired, now a recluse living in the hills north of town. I scribbled down the address, shoved the card back into the drawer, and ran. Professor Graves lived in a crumbling farmhouse surrounded by skeletal trees. A rusted gate hung crookedly from one hinge, and the mailbox was jammed with yellowed letters. I pounded on the door until my hands hurt. It opened a crack. A bloodshot eye peered out at me. "Who are you?" "Jason, I please Alaric Went, the book mortuarer." The words tumbled out in a breathless rush. The door opened wider. A thin, pale man with a patchy beard and shaking hands stepped back to let me in. "You shouldn't have come here," he muttered. "You shouldn't have brought that." I followed him into a parlour stacked with books, candles guttering in wine bottles. The air smelled of mould and candle wax. He pointed at the book, clutched to my chest. "Set it down." I did. He flinched when it touched the table. "You've seen the 9th page, haven't you?" I nodded. "Someone opened it. I don't know who. People I loved are gone. I can't even remember them anymore." Graves slumped into an armchair, his hands over his face. "It always comes back. We tried to destroy it decades ago, sealed it with flesh and blood, but it wants to be seen. And once the 9th page is opened..." He trailed off. "What happens?" I demanded. He looked up at me, eyes wet. "It grows. It erases. Those who read it vanish from the world, from memory, from themselves. You'll be next. Even your own reflection will stop recognizing you." I swallowed. "How do I stop it?" He laughed a brittle, broken sound. "You can't." I grabbed him by the shoulders. "There has to be a way." His mouth worked soundlessly. Then finally, he whispered, "There is one thing we never tried. One theory, that if the book finishes its Eresharif, it devours enough memory it might vanish on its own. But you would have to let it finish you too." "No," I said. "I can't. There has to be another way." He shook his head. "It will follow you. It will eat the world to get to you. And once no one remembers you, you'll wish you'd let it take you." A crash sounded behind me. I spun. The book had fallen open again. The 9th page lay exposed, the symbols twisting like worms, the fleshy edges pulsing. Graves screamed, "Don't look." But it was too late. My eyes met the page, and the world went white. I woke on the floor of Graves's parlour, the book lying open beside me, its pages fluttering in a breeze that wasn't there. Graves was gone. The house was silent, except for a faint whispering that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. I tried to stand, but my legs were numb. My head throbbed with a pressure that felt like someone had driven nails into my skull. I pressed my palms to my temples and felt something wet. When I pulled them away, they were smeared with ink. Black, oily ink that writhed across my skin and sank into my pores. I crawled to the book, intent on slamming it shut again, but the symbols on the 9th page glowed faintly now, each character pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. I couldn't look away. As I watched, the symbols began to unravel into something like language. Not quite English, not quite anything else, but I understood it, somewhere deep in the old reptile part of my brain. We are forgotten. We are devoured. We are you. The whispers in the walls grew louder. I tried to back away, but my hands were rooted to the book, skin fusing with the cover, the thin membrane of flesh where the 9th page had been now extending, sliding over my wrists like wet bandages. I screamed, yanking backward, tearing my skin. Blood splattered the floor. The book shuddered once and then slammed shut on its own. Silence fell. I looked around. Graves's chair was empty. The house was gone. I was standing in a blank white void, the book still in my hands. The 9th page opened again by itself, but now the flesh was gone. The page was clean, blank, except for a single line of text. You do not exist. I tried to speak, but no sound came out. The white void shimmered, and suddenly I saw flashes of faces. Dani, my father, people I didn't even recognize, all of them staring at me with empty eyes, mouths moving in soundless screams. Their forms rippled, dissolving into black smears that stretched and warped into the letters of the book's language. Then the void folded inward, like paper crumpling into a tight ball, and I was standing in my apartment again, but everything was wrong. The walls were slick with black mold, the ceiling dripping with something that smelled like rotting meat. Shadows twisted across the floor, shapes of people with 2 long limbs and featureless faces. In the center of the room stood Dani, or something that wore her shape. She smiled at me, but her mouth didn't move right. It stretched too far, the skin splitting at the corners. "Jason," she rasped, her voice layered with dozens of others. "It's time." I backed away, clutching the book. "You're not real." She stepped closer, the shadows following her like a tide. "Neither are you." I turned and ran, but the apartment hallway had become a black tunnel that twisted and turned like an intestine. Every door I passed was bricked up, scrawled with symbols that bled as I ran past. Dani's voice echoed after me. "You can't outrun forgetting." I burst into a stairwell that spiraled downward into darkness. I took the steps 2 at a time, the book pressed to my chest, its cover burning hot. Behind me, I heard the wet slap of bare feet on concrete, getting closer. At the bottom of the stairs was a door, slightly ajar. Light spilled through the crack. I dove through it. I was outside again, in the dead field beneath the grey sky. The house was gone. Dani was gone. The world was silent, except for the faint rustle of the grass. I looked down at the book. The cover had changed. No longer skin, but black leather with silver lettering on the spine that read simply, Mortuoro. The 9th page had vanished completely, as if it had never existed. I heard a voice behind me. "Jason." I spun. It was my father, real this time. I knew it by the way the wind shifted his thinning hair, the crease of worry on his forehead. He looked at me, eyes brimming with tears. "Son," he whispered, "it's over." I shook my head. "I don't understand." He stepped forward, his hands trembling. "You did it. You let it take enough. It's finished." I looked down at my hands. They were fading. The skin turned translucent, the bones visible beneath like pale smoke. I looked up at him, panic rising in my throat. "I don't want to go," I whispered. "I know," he said, crying now. "I'm so sorry." I tried to reach out to him, but my hands passed through his. The wind picked up, tugging at the edges of my dissolving form. As I faded, I heard other voices, Dani, Graves, countless others whispering in my ear. "Thank you. Thank you. Thank you." Then there was nothing. I don't know how long I was gone. I woke in a hospital bed, an IV in my arm, sunlight streaming through a cracked window. A nurse came in and smiled at me. "You're awake," she said brightly. "Welcome back." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. She handed me a cup of water, and I drank greedily. "What happened?" I croaked. "You were found unconscious in an old farmhouse," she said. "You've been in a coma for 3 days." "Where's the book?" I asked. She frowned. "What book?" "The book. The one with the flesh." She patted my shoulder gently. "You must have had some vivid dreams. Rest now, the doctor will be in soon." She left. I lay back against the pillow, my mind spinning. Had it all been a hallucination? A nightmare? I tried to think of Dani, of Graves, of the others. But their faces were already fading. I closed my eyes, trying to hold on. And in the darkness behind my lids, I saw the 9th page, stitched shut again, waiting. I knew, deep in my bones, that it would never really be gone. Because the 9th page isn't just a piece of a book. It's a place, a door. And someday, someone else will look at it, and it will look back,